Smoke your hawk, get out your bib, solid, picking a rib. Out to eat to a barbecue and start picking a rib.
And kept on picking.
Good for them, good for me and you, so let's start picking too. Old King Cole came out of a hole by picking a rib. Picking, smoked a hog on a red outlaw, called it a barbecue. Say, stomping chicken, we've got a new creation. Say, you better start picking, cause barbecue's taking your name.
It's time for Pickin' and Flickin' in the Nostril Zone, where I pick a book off my shelf and flick through it. What else could that mean? I'm your host, cartoonist Kyle Bridget, and before we dive in, make sure to hit like, hit subscribe, be a ding-dong daddy, and ding that bell. Today we're looking at Vincent Segrels, Vincente Segrelli. I don't know how to pronounce it, but we're looking at The Mercenary, or El Mercenario. This is book 1, The Cult of Sacred Fire. This is printed fairly recently, but it is an older work. I would say maybe 1979, 1980. This was published in 2017. So I guess it's starting to get a little old now. And he has a bunch of books in this series, like a whole bunch, about these knights that ride kind of like flying dragons or dinosaurs, and they live in this sort of sky realm on tops of mountains where you fly from one mountaintop castle to another mountaintop. It's kind of like a high fantasy story with this novel flying dragon approach. This is the first book. I also have the second book, The Formula, published by MBM the following year. And they were supposed to print these every year afterwards, but I think they stopped at 2. So I kind of had to go back and start digging, and I went a little crazy trying to find all these. This is the next volume. When is this printed? It says 84 and 88. So probably the first time this was printed was 84, and this one was printed in 88. And this is actually the next 2 chapters. I have 1 and 2 in these nice large hard covers, and then I have this floppy paperback, and then I have a bunch more. I have these ones and this, and here's some more. These are all kind of different printings and different editions. And then once I got to here, I kind of got a little sick of the whole thing, and I stopped hunting them down. But the thing about The Mercenary is that it's, what's the word I'm looking for? Picturesque. The whole thing is done as paintings. So these are not drawings. These are every panel is a painting. The whole thing is rendered in oil, and it's breathtaking and unique in comics, I think, certainly at the time. And this is a mercenary here, and he's hired to rescue this nude woman in bondage. I can't remember why exactly, but he does. And I'm actually going to go back to that page because I feel like this image has some serious sort of mythic influences. You can kind of picture Perseus rescuing Andromeda from the Kraken in Clash of the Titans. And there's a lot of paintings of that mythological scene that are really famous and probably influenced Segrelli's to some degree. So he comes across another slightly less nude woman and rescues her. There's quite a bit of nudity in these books. Not as much in the later ones as in this first volume. He's going hard with this first one, but there is a fair bit. So rescuing the second woman leads the first woman to double cross him, and he gets taken prisoner and tied up here. And then he escapes. I don't actually really remember the story very well. It's been a while since I've read it, but I don't think the story is all that important to our purposes here. We're mostly just looking at this art, and it's really nice to see this sort of lush painted comic. It's not something you normally see. So there's some sort of intrigue here between the different competing factions here, the different women. And I like this realization here. She's aiming her arrow, defending the mercenary, and then she kind of has this slow realization, and this jelly-like blood starts dripping down her face, and she's been double-crossed. And it actually is kind of complicated, all the twists and turns in the story. I don't really remember them all that well. Like I said, I bought the first 2 volumes, and then I got a whole bunch of other ones, and I kind of read them all at once and kind of burnt out on it pretty quick. It probably is a series that would be better served by 1 volume a year. And here's the man, Vincente Segrellis. I'm not going to try to figure out the correct pronunciation, but here he is in his studio at work. And so these first 2 volumes that were published in 2017, 2018, they have a lot of background information laying out the sort of Tolkien-esque world building. It might be a little generous to say Tolkien-esque, but the kind of world building that he was doing and what some of his processes were. And he's telling it in first person here. Like he says, one of the issues I had at the beginning was how to deal with the saddles, and like this was like his early concept was, knights, medieval knights, and like flying dinosaurs. And so how do you put a saddle on a pterodactyl? He gives a lot of good information, about like his process. And there's some nice sort of close-up shots of the artwork. I really like this arrow here with like the different textures, the soft feathers in the shaft and how it kind of dents into the helmet. This down here where he's taken an arrow to the leg, I really like. You can see, the light is hitting the armor really nicely and gives you a good feel for the texture. And then where it dents in, where the arrow hits, the light wraps around. He's a very competent painter, and it's just a joy to see. This has kind of Mobius vibes, not in the style that it's drawn in, but in just kind of the scale, the big open expanse with, the flying dinosaur creature here. You'll have to see it, folks. You can see he's put a lot of thought into the mechanics of the world. And there you go. So I just thought this was such a great printing, these first 2 volumes here. They look really great. You get these, giant monsters and knights and graphic violence and high fantasy and some babes sprinkled in there. And it's a lot of fun. These later printings, they look good too, but it is a little smaller. You can't really luxuriate in the panels quite as well as you can in the nice larger printing. But, I guess the demand just wasn't there. And so there's lots of interesting things going on and, great colors and images to look at. But, my main complaint, I guess, is just that the story is kind of incidental to that. It's secondary to the artwork and the world building and the themes and the little minute mechanics of how things work in this world. And I feel like all that is just more fleshed out than the actual story. And like, he's a mercenary, so like he's always being sent on different missions and they're kind of indistinct and you don't really need to read them all together. In fact, I think it probably hurts the experience if you try to read them one after another like I did. I would have been much better off if I could just picked up one every year and kind of just enjoyed it on its own terms. How do I rate this? I do think that this volume, this bigger size, this first book, is worth picking up. It's a really nice presentation. The artwork is gorgeous. It's really nice to flick through and enjoy. The story's just not there. And it kind of suffers from the same thing that a lot of fantasy and comics suffers from, where, I like the idea of fantasy and comics, but they rarely deliver on the story in the way that I hope when I pick them up. So I'm going to rate this. And, I'm thinking about every other volume of this that comes after, even though most were printed earlier than this. But in terms of the story that sequentially come after, or canonically come after, I guess that's the word I'm looking for. None of those that I've found are anywhere near as good as this first one. Like, I think this is the best of all the books that I've picked up so far. There's more besides what I've shown. And I think to that end, that this first volume in this printing gets a 3.5 nostril rating. I think it's earned that. The later volumes, they probably veer between like 2.5 and 3. But this first one is a solid 3.5 nostrils, and it's worth picking up. But they do all look great, and they're a lot of fun to look at, especially if you like, fantasy art and dragons and dudes and babes. If you like Boris Vallejo or something, these are probably worth picking up. Certainly this first volume. And I guess that's it for today. And if you like this program, you should join my Patreon, where you can help support me and get early access to all my videos, including Canonically Crumb. As well, you'll be thanked at the end of the show. And if you're not interested in that, well, you can just flick off.
Smoke your hog, get out your bin, solid, digging a rib.